Damn, baby. That was so good. Twice last night and again this morning. I think you've outdone yourself. When was the last time we slept 3 times in 12 hours? I grinned. Since the girls were born. This empty nest thing has its advantages. Amy snuggled up to me, and I wrapped my arms around my wife of 20 years. I still missed the girls, but it felt really good to be here with her. The last 22 years flashed through my mind. Dating, marrying Amy, then having the girls a year apart. We became a family. The girls grew up, from dolls to bikes, then soccer, boyfriends, driver's licenses, and graduations. Suddenly, they were hundreds of miles away at college, and Amy and I were an empty nest. I kissed the top of her head. Baby, the last 20 years have flown by like a blur. I want us to take advantage of this time and be a couple again. Like we were 2 decades ago. Amy giggled. Well, we're not newlyweds. But there are plenty of things we can do to keep the fire burning. I felt blissfully content as I gently stroked her hand. I loved the feel of her soft skin, and she purred in appreciation. I thought I was about to fall asleep when Amy lifted her head and kissed me on the lips. Tim, she said, her voice soft but clear. Making love to you is one of my favorite joys in life, and I know you feel the same way. We're good together, and I never want that to change. Sleepily, I mumbled back, You make me very happy. I'm lucky to have you. She leaned over and kissed me again. What we have together is wonderful, and I want us to always be together. I want you to help me spoil our grandchildren when they come along and be there for me when we get old too. Too sleepy to answer, I just nodded and pulled her close. She kissed me lightly on the lips again, and I felt her hand move lower. But before grandchildren take over our lives, I want to have one more adventure. I want some more thrills before we become grandparents and slide into old age. Slowly, her words filtered into my consciousness, pulling me out of the fog of impending sleep. I stirred, raising an eyebrow in an unasked question. What? I mumbled. I know it's selfish, she began. But I want to have one more little adventure before we get too old to explore new things. Her words kept echoing in my mind. Adventure, I thought, blinking in confusion. What kind of adventure was she planning? As my thoughts floated back to the surface, a distant alarm rang in my head. I opened my eyes and saw her beautiful face framed by a wild mop of blonde hair. Her eyes were filled with concern as she studied me. I started stroking her hand again. An adventure, HM? What kind of adventure do you have planned for us? She leaned in and kissed me again. Like I said, it's a little selfish. The alarm in my head was now loud and clear. So this adventure is for you, not for us? She wrinkled her nose slightly, her expression softening. Well, yes, but I think you can have your own adventure too. The alarm bells were ringing in my mind now, pumping adrenaline through my body. Stop. If you love your parents, then like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you didn't like the video or subscribe to the channel, it means you don't love them. Continue. I braced myself against the headboard of the bed, pushing Amy away from me. Fully focused, I met her gaze. Amy, stop beating around the bush. Tell me, what do you mean by adventure? She pulled away slightly. It's okay. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset. Yet, I replied, my voice tight. Tell me what this is about. Amy took a breath. I told you that Dan from sales was bragging about the sailboat he and his brother Rob bought last month. Susan, my cubicle neighbor, went sailing with them for the weekend. She said it was great and that she wanted to go again. I said it sounded fun, and she must have told Dan, because now he's asked us both to go sailing next weekend. I stared at her, trying to make sense of it all. So some guy I've never met asked my wife to go away with him for the weekend? She nodded. Oh, and with Labor Day on Monday, it'll be a 3-day weekend. I shook my head. That's selfish. I have pictures of the boat if you want to see. It's really pretty. And Susan said she had a great time sailing around the lake. I exhaled, trying to stay calm. Amy, Susan is single, and you're married. Don't you see the problem here? I know, baby, she said, reaching out to touch my face. I jerked my head away. But it's just one weekend. Just one last adventure. I jumped up from the bed. No way in hell. Forget it. I'm not letting you play the naughty student and spend the weekend on a sailboat having fun with your coworker. She tried to defend herself. I didn't say anything about sleeping with him. Come on, I interrupted. What makes you think these guys would invite two girls to spend the weekend on their boat? Did Susan tell you what she did with them when she left? Amy looked down at the bed, her face flushing. Yes, she had sex with them. But that doesn't mean I should, and her story about floating around on the deck and then sleeping with her brothers has nothing to do with you wanting to be there with her. Tim, I was starting to feel sick. It's not about the boat, is it? The real adventure is spending the weekend in the company of two young studs. Amy sighed. Babe, I'm sorry. I think I was just caught up in the excitement of Susan's story. It sounded like such a grand adventure. I'm sorry. I'll tell them I'm not going. I stood there, my mind racing. 20 minutes ago, I was as happy as I'd ever been in my life. Holding you in my arms, I felt content and confident in our love and your commitment to our marriage. But now I see it was just a fantasy. I convinced myself that you were as content and devoted as I was. But I was wrong. No, Tim, it's not a fantasy. I really love you, and I always will, she pleaded. Please, baby. I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Hell, I probably wasn't thinking at all. Please ignore everything I said. I turned my back to her, the weight of her words pressing down on me. She said the last words to my back as I walked into our bathroom. I closed and locked the door. Stepping into the shower, I washed off the remnants of our lovemaking, my mind still numb from the shock of my wife's suggestion. How could she believe I would agree to such a betrayal? When I came out, Amy was lying face down on the bed, sobbing loudly. She looked up at me, her beautiful face now flooded with tears. I sat down on the bed, and she pulled herself up, pressing her body against me. I wrapped my arms around her and stroked her gently until her sobs subsided. Amy, for 22 years, you made me believe in us, in our relationship. I thought we wanted the same things, that we had the same desires. I never once doubted you until today. Oh my God, Tim, I'm so sorry, she cried harder. While you were in the shower, I kept thinking about what I said, about what I planned. I asked myself how I would feel if the situation were reversed. If you had told me that two girls had invited you to go swimming this weekend. I almost threw up. It's so selfish, like I'm an immature teenager instead of a wife and mother. I'm so ashamed of myself, and I feel so stupid. So what do we do now? Where do we go from here? How can I trust myself, knowing that I was willing to go through with this? Her voice broke again as she sobbed. I've ruined everything. Now I can't even imagine how I could have thought such an idea would be acceptable to any husband. Baby, I guess I just took you for granted. You've always been so reliable to me, and I think I just gave in to a silly, selfish whim. I completely neglected and disrespected you. I thought it would be fun, so I just ignored everything else. And that's so unlike me. This is all so unlike you, I replied. At least, the you I've known and loved for the past 22 years. Baby, please tell me how I can make this right. I know it's all my fault, but what can I say or do to get you to give me a chance to fix things? I sat there, overwhelmed by the weight of the conversation. I don't know. Our marriage is seriously damaged. Everything I thought was true is now untrue. I'm just devastated, Amy. You say you just took me for granted. Is that my fault? Was I too loyal to you? Do you find me boring now? The pain in my voice was undeniable. Oh my God, what have I done? No, she whispered, shaking her head. It was all me, my selfishness, my childish indulgence. Maybe, just maybe, your devotion was so strong that I convinced myself it was okay to take your love for granted. But that was wrong. I should have treasured your devotion, not tried to take advantage of it. I just pray you'll let me try to prove that I realize the error of my ways and give me a chance to save our marriage. I didn't know if her plea convinced me or if I was just so desperate to believe that she was still the woman I'd loved for 22 years. But I nodded. Amy threw herself into my arms, sobbing and kissing me. Call Susan and tell her to tell the boys you're not going. And, Amy, promise me you'll stay away from Dan at work. Either you or Susan, or both of you, need to let him know that it's not okay to invite you to spend the weekend with him. You need to make it clear to everyone that you would never do that. Amy nodded through her tears. You know, maybe I should think about going to work for your sister at her bakery. We don't need the extra money, and she could use the help. It would be the responsible thing to do. You know, an adult, mature, unselfish, responsible thing to do. She smiled a small, hopeful smile, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. Epilogue. I thought about what Amy had done for quite a while. I couldn't bring myself to believe that 22 years of love should be ruined because of one selfish plan that she ultimately discarded. I was still very hurt by her disrespect, but I forced myself to give her a chance to make amends. It took time, but gradually, the doubts that Amy had caused faded away. She loved working at the bakery until she retired to spend more time with our grandchildren. I still had a year or two before I joined her in retirement. Once I retired, Amy said she was ready for a new adventure, with me and no one else.